Have you ever found painting clouds a challenge, or maybe just not been sure of how to even get started, how to approach painting them? Well, this episode is for you then. So, clouds and sky are just as important as the land in a landscape painting. The two are integrally connected with what happens in the sky, impacting the value pattern that falls across the landscape. So in this episode, I want to share 4 things with you to help you see the clouds and the sky, to capture them on your paper or canvas, and to use them to enhance your compositions. So we're going to look at seeing and creating form, using lost and found edges, catching the color and the light, and making clouds actually part of the composition. Let's dive in. First up is seeing and creating form. Think about clouds as forms. They're very much like foliage masses. Don't think of them as little individual bitty pieces, but think of them as larger masses of light and dark. If you can begin to look at the overall forms of those clouds, it becomes so much easier to paint them. Look for the basic shapes, the forms that are created by the planes of the clouds. I like to call it the shoebox. And think of the cloud form as a stack of shoeboxes with a different value for each plane. Let's look at one of John Constable's cloud studies in terms of this. So Constable painted lots and lots of clouds, many of them plein air on location on card and inexpensive canvas. Those studies found their way into his later paintings, but he spent a lot of time observing in nature. It's the first step. Get out there and observe. When we get closer in on some of these clouds, we can begin to see how he's used value to create those forms. We can think of them and begin to see their shoebox shape. So let me draw this on top here, and then I think it will become a little bit clearer. So if we think about this as being this form right here, as being a box up in the sky, and we are seeing sides of that box. Oops. And we're seeing a bottom of the box. Here we've got the basic geometric shape. And here we have a separation of the planes. This front face of it is where the light's striking, and it's the lightest value. Then the side of it is getting a little bit less light, and it's going to be a medium value. The bottom is shielded from the light almost completely, and it's very dark. But understanding where those planes are makes it so much easier to begin to paint the clouds as form. Let's look at this one over here. We can do almost that same thing again. Shoebox. There's one side. Here's another. And then right here we have the bottom. And they go on back into space that way. So here is the lightest section, the medium value, and the dark. Our second point, the second factor we want to think about, is using lost and found edges. By that I mean soft and hard edges, where one value comes up against the next. Paying attention to edges is really crucial with clouds. Be sure to include both hard and soft edges, with most of them being soft. We can see that here again in Constable's painting. There are predominantly soft edges in the area where you have more the medium values and the dark, and harder edges in the highlights. Remember that clouds aren't solid matter. They're ephemeral, and they're made up of little particles of dust and moisture. So if you make all of your edges hard, it's going to make your cloud appear solid and heavy. It'll look like it's going to fall out of the sky, and that's not what we're after. It's not what we want. Our third factor is catching the color and the light. The key to catching form, to creating form, and to creating a strong sense of light in your clouds is how you use color. You want to avoid relying on just black and white as the only colors you mix. Use a contrast in value to create form and temperature to create light. So in this particular painting, this is one of mine, and it's the first stage where I thought I was done, but I wasn't quite done yet. And you can see in those clouds that there's a distinct sense of form. You have a sense that there are different planes to the clouds. There is the shoebox effect. But it doesn't look as lit as Constables that we just looked at. So to make it look like it's filled with more light, I needed to add temperature in addition to value. By alternating temperature, I was able to create that sense of strong light hitting those clouds. So we can see that in Constables as well. Let's go all the way back up here and look at Constable's sketch. And you can see where he's using warm and cool colors to create that sense of light striking the cloud. Avoid using black and white to mix the grays of your clouds. Instead, use rich neutrals that veer more towards warm or cool colors, just as Constable did here, and as I did in my final painting there. Our fourth factor is to make clouds part of the composition. One of the things that tends to happen is that people focus on the landscape, predominantly on the land itself in the landscape, and the sky becomes an afterthought. I want to encourage you to think of the sky instead as being just as important as the land and make it a crucial part of your composition. How do you go about doing that? Well, let's look at the reference photo I worked from for that last painting. It was late afternoon after a storm. Remnants of the clouds were still hanging over the ocean. When I took the quick photo, the emphasis is really more on the wave than it is on the clouds. So there are a number of different directions that I could go with this particular composition. You can make the clouds the focus of your composition, or you can simply make them play a more supportive role. In either case, they can help to create the mood or the sense of atmosphere. Now, in order to create more of a focus on the ocean itself, in particular on the waves, I'm going to leave more of the ocean showing. Now the focal point, the emphasis is the wave and not the cloud. The clouds here create a supporting role for the wave. They help lead the viewer's eye to the focal point. So they form a really nice S-curve that leads down to that wave. Now, if I want to put more emphasis on the sky and less emphasis on the water, then what I'm going to do is take away the distraction from the water. And I'm going to put more emphasis on the sky instead, which is what I ended up doing in my final painting. And the focal point in this version is this spot right here on the cloud. And the way that I ended up using both value and temperature helped to solidify that this is the main focal point here. Everything points to it. But in this case, the entire sky is activated, and the sky is really the subject of the painting way more than what falls below. So in summary, those 4 points, I want you to think about looking for the basic forms and shapes in clouds and their overall pattern in the sky. Number 2, use lost and found edges, those hard and soft edges, to capture the ephemeral quality of clouds. Number 3, use value and temperature to create a sense of form and light. And last but not least, integrate the overall pattern, shapes, and values in the sky into your overall composition, and you'll end up with a stronger painting. If you found this helpful and you'd like to learn more about these basic principles, be sure to check out my online course, Composition, Color, and Light. Happy painting, everybody, and feel free to share this with any friends of yours who you think might find it helpful. Bye-bye for now.